What is really good, everyone? Welcome into episode 56 of the Two Stripes podcast, the podcast that covers everything going on in the world of college football. My name is Colton Denning. I am your host, coming to you from beautiful Oakland, California on Wednesday, August 29, 2018. Hope everybody's having a very good week and prepping up to what should be a very fun weekend as we gear up for the first full weekend of the 2018 college football season. I want to thank everybody for listening to today's show. The Two Stripes podcast on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud.com/Two Stripes Pod is where you can find the show. You can find me on Twitter at DubsCo, and you can find all of my college football work on YouTube. If you go to YouTube.com/Colton Denning, you can find this episode and all the other old episodes of the Two Stripes podcast there. And you can also find some college football highlight videos up there as well. It's going to be more than just Ohio State stuff this year. So I encourage you, if you enjoy the show or my work, to check it out. I think you'll like it. So most of the offseason, with some intermittent periods in between, I've been doing season previews for individual teams around FBS in college football. But now that the season is basically here, that's come to a stop, and I am going to start previewing every single week and doing a recap. I'm not really sure what the format of that's going to be, but I'm going to try something new this week, and I hope you all enjoy it because I think it's pretty unique. And what that's going to be is I'm sitting down with two people from two different sides of a particular game each week and just getting their thoughts on the game, what they think about their opponent, and just trying to weave a story of that particular game in that matchup in whatever week it happens to be. So we'll see how that goes, but it definitely helps when you have a matchup like today's episode is between Michigan and Notre Dame. So earlier in the week, I got the chance to speak with Patrick Sullivan from OneFootDown.com, Notre Dame's SB Nation site, and then the managing editor for MaizeandBrew.com, Anthony Broome, Michigan's SB Nation site, about this game between Michigan and Notre Dame this week in what's a renewed rivalry and what should be a really fun game, not only on the field, but storyline-wise between the two coaches. And I got a lot of really cool insight that I think people that not just are Notre Dame or Michigan fans will like, but just fans of college football in general. My favorite thing about this game as an Ohio State fan is I just get to sit back and watch everything burn, which has been happening to my team a lot this offseason, so I'm sure people have been enjoying that. But it's nice to kind of have the team out of the spotlight for a second and to watch this game, and either Notre Dame or Michigan's going to take an L, but I think it'll be a really fun game and one that can set the tone for both of their seasons, whether they win or lose. This is a put-up-or-shut-up game for Michigan, and I think Notre Dame is kind of under the radar this season, which doesn't really happen all that often, but they've been really quiet, and so this is a game that could put them on the map whether they win or lose. So I think there's a lot of interesting stories to come out of this game. So we might as well get right into it and get to the story of this week's Michigan and Notre Dame game. Hope you guys like it. The first thing about this game is that it's a rivalry between two of the most storied programs in college football history, so it's fun to hear from each fan base about what they think of the rivalry and each other's teams, starting with Patrick and Notre Dame.
There's a large contingent of Notre Dame fans that really enjoy the rivalry. I mean, we all hate Michigan regardless, but there's a good group of them that like playing them every year. It's fun to have an opponent you hate so much on the schedule. Me personally, I just despise Michigan. I would have rather we left it at that 2014 game. It was so perfect and just amazingly. I never could have asked for a better finish to a series with a team I hated than that game. So the fact we are playing them again, I'm a little bitter just because I love how perfect the ending was. But I mean, generally we despise them. We love playing them and beating them. It's the worst possible thing when we lose to them. So that's not something I'm looking forward to if that were to happen. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's fun to have teams on our schedule that you are this passionate about hating. I mean, no offense to like Ball State later on in our schedule or Vanderbilt, but this is a game you can get up for and get really excited for. So it's at least fun to have.
It's pretty much the same for Michigan fans who, as Anthony says here, are probably going to roll pretty deep into South Bend.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, the Michigan State rivalry, the Ohio State rivalry, those are a little more heated. And I certainly think there's some quote-unquote hatred between these two fan bases for Saturday. But I think this one's a little bit more of a fun rivalry because it is a non-conference game. We have gone through this gap of where I guess you don't know what you got until it's gone. I think people have missed playing Notre Dame. The last couple seasons we've seen non-conference games against like Hawaii and just UNLV. That doesn't do anything for fans, and it doesn't really do anything for me. It's fun to beat a team by 45 points or whatever, but I think this is a game where you look at, it's been a while. I don't have it in front of me. This is the first time I can remember them opening the season up against each other. So it's one of those things where there is no couple games of hype to kind of get ready for it. This is a measuring stick game right off the bat for both teams, and two programs right now that I think mirror each other in a lot of ways. So I'm excited for it. Fans are excited for it. Obviously, the stadium's going to be packed on Saturday night, but I think there are going to be quite a bit of Michigan fans that make the trip down as well. So I think people are excited to have it back, and whether they continue to do this on a yearly basis or they do a 2 years on, 2 years off, which is something I can definitely see them doing. I think it's exciting that it's back because Michigan, Notre Dame, there's not a lot of games in those first 3 or 4 weeks in the season that create a ton of buzz. But when those two names get together, it's something pretty special.
As Patrick is about to tell me, that 2014 game could have been even uglier. But that's not what everybody's here for this year. Everybody wants to know who's going to blow up first on the sideline, Brian Kelly or Jim Harbaugh?
Well, first of all, let me just correct you. The final score of that game was 37-0. I know the official record book took away that last pick six because we ruined Devin Gardner's life with that hit, Max Redfield. But no, I mean, I would say almost 100% certainty with people as explosive as Jim Harbaugh and Brian Kelly. You're gonna see some fireworks. One of them is going to be screaming at some point. I'm positive. It's probably going to be Brian Kelly on the first play of the game. That seems to typically happen. The team will probably come out and, I don't know, get a delay of game penalty or something. And I'm sure Harbaugh will be screaming throughout. So it should be pretty good content coming out of this one.
Speaking of Jim Harbaugh, this is a pretty massive game for him and the Michigan program as a whole.
1-5 in rivalry games, against Michigan State, Ohio State since he came to Michigan. Now, a couple of those have been, the most famous one was the JT was short or not short play in Columbus a few years ago. You had the trouble with the snap punt game against Michigan State. So really you're 2 plays away from being 3-3. And I think that the perception maybe even changes just a little bit if you just get one of those games. So obviously Notre Dame has not been one of those games. And like I said, it is a rivalry game. And this is a stat that I'm not sure even your audience might not even be aware of. Michigan hasn't gone on the road and beaten a ranked team since 2006. So there's more than just the rivalry stuff on the line here. I mean, this is a big deal for them. And whether people will say, oh, well, maybe Notre Dame's overrated, Michigan's overrated, that's going to be one of the things that no matter who wins on Saturday, you're going to hear, oh, well, Michigan was overrated anyways, or, oh, well, Notre Dame was overrated anyways. So you're going to hear that either way. And even if Michigan finds a way to get it done in South Bend, people are going to say, well, he hasn't beaten Michigan State and Ohio State. So it's one of those things with the perception of Jim Harbaugh right now where people aren't really going to believe it until they see it at this point, because we've seen, there was a lot of hype early on, a lot of it self-generated. And then this offseason coming off of a year where you went 8-5, you lost to your rivals again, disappointing season. A lot of things just didn't go right. People didn't want to hear, the silly stories and the stories of the weird recruiting visits and the trips overseas. They just want this team to kind of go into a submarine and come out on the other side and win football games. And like I said, I think that even if Michigan wins this game Saturday, people are going to say that, oh, well, you still need to be Michigan State and Ohio State. But even just getting that win on the road against a ranked team in a tough place to play, that's, to me, this is what, for both of these teams on Saturday, this is a perception game that kind of sets you up and can propel you throughout the rest of the season. So, and that's what I've always liked about the rivalry too. It seems like more often than not, the team that wins this game, kind of goes on to have a pretty good season, and the one that doesn't kind of disappoints a little bit. So And there certainly have been Michigan teams that have beaten Notre Dame that have gone on to only win 7 or 8 games. And so there's an exception to that, certainly. But for these two teams, you're both ranked inside the top 15. Now, this is one you have to have, and one that I think you can bounce back from if you lose it. Certainly, we've seen that, in the college football playoff, how they've been rating things out there. But, it's one that if you do win it, that's going to be something they look at down the road, too.
The biggest story for Michigan this offseason was the addition of former Ole Miss quarterback Shea Patterson. We know he's going to start, but is his skill set going to change the way Michigan plays offensively?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a little bit different. Not so, you're going to see the pro-style stuff. That's what they want to do. But I think you're going to see a little more up-tempo. I think you're going to see a little bit more out of the shotgun. They made a lot of changes, forced to make some changes here and there on the coaching staff over the offseason due to some attrition. They had their offensive coordinator resign, which probably should have been a firing anyways. So in kind of a roundabout way, they made the changes they needed to make offensively after, they were 91st in scoring last year, 110th in passing. That just can't happen. That's not what anyone signed up for. And I know they had injuries at quarterback last year and all kinds of problems, young skill players, but pretty much everyone's back this year. And now you get a guy in Shea Patterson who I know there's buzz that he could be a first-round pick in next year's draft. Like I said, I'm in kind of wait-and-see mode with him, but I do think he's got a lively arm. He's got those Baker Mayfield type of skill set where he's going to go through. He can run, he can make plays, but he's going to go through his progressions, and if something's not there, maybe he tries to create something. So I think that you're going to see a little bit more maybe improvisation out of them.
Not knowing how Michigan's going to look with Patterson presents its own challenge, but you add in the fact that Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator, and you could see how the Irish may start the game off a little conservatively on defense.
It's Clark Lee's first game as defensive coordinator. It's this new quarterback that, I'm sure they've seen some film on him, but you don't really know what he's going to bring to the table. He was this hyped up recruit that he was pretty good at Ole Miss, but it wasn't like he was a Heisman candidate or something. So I would imagine they'll be a little more conservative, at least in the early going, but I would hope that Clark Lee opens it up maybe in the second quarter, because if you don't put some pressure on this guy, you let him get comfortable, I feel like he can make some throws. I do know their receiver core is not exactly the strongest in the country, and I know Tariq Black, one of their starters, he's going to be out for the game, so he's already lost a receiver to throw to, which is nice for the Notre Dame defense, but you still can't let him get comfortable back there because he's such a talented player. So I would imagine they'll be conservative, at least to start, but hopefully they bring it after that.
Outside of Patterson, Michigan really needs their wide receivers and offensive line to step up. 2 units that necessarily haven't in the biggest stages under Jim Harbaugh.
Wide receivers only had 3 touchdown catches total the entire year. And that's something that they kind of took to heart. And now you have Jim McElwain comes in, and former head coach and offensive coordinator. Now he's just coaching your wide receivers. So you expect to see more out of them in that regard. I think when I look at this game against Notre Dame, you're going to kind of know early. I think, if you come out and go 3 and out or turn over the football, I don't think that's great. I think you need to go, even if you just pick up a couple first downs and have to punt the ball away, just to be able to move the ball, make some plays through the air. Now, they lost a guy in Tariq Black at wide receiver who broke his other foot after breaking his foot last year. And really, as a true freshman, in a couple games that he played, was their best wide receiver. After that, you didn't get anything out of those guys. So they have talented guys there. It's just a matter of coaching them up is really what it is. It's not for lack of talent or star power of the guys that they've brought in that they have there. So I think that obviously Notre Dame, we think that they're going to have a really good defense, or at least a good defense. So Michigan has struggled in those games against some of those teams that are able to punch them in the mouth, namely up front on the offensive line, which is really, I think, the key to all this. So, but I think for them, the playbook is a little more simple than it was last year. I know a couple players have been very outspoken about how much more comfortable they are, and especially, namely the offensive line. I think those guys are aware that they're kind of tired of being the guys that let down the rest of the offense. And so there's a little bit of a chip there.
If Michigan hasn't sorted out their offensive issues, then an experienced Notre Dame defense may be able to eat them up.
The first, I don't know how many years under Brian Kelly, we kept switching defensive coordinators and having just these terrible systems like Brian Van Gorders. And we finally found one last year that was extremely successful with Mike Elko, and the fact that we were able to take his linebackers coach and just make him defensive coordinator so we can continue running the same system with the same guys who have gotten a lot of experience because a lot of these guys were playing as freshmen on that terrible team. So now they're all juniors and seniors, and they've played a lot. And there's just, I would say at every level of the defense, there's a player that I'm supremely confident in. Like on the defensive line, Jerry Tillery is a senior that almost went pro but decided to come back. Same thing at linebacker with Tavon Coney, and also Drew Tranquil, who's just, I feel like he's been there forever now, but the dude is a stud and he's a senior. He knows what he's doing. And then Julian Love, I think, is the best player on the defense at corner. If he has the same kind of year they did last year, he'll be a first-team All-American. The dude broke up like 20 passes last year and had 3 picks. 2 of them were pick sixes. He's just a great player. So I think that's where most of my confidence comes from, is just all these guys have been around doing this for a while. The depth could be an issue if some guys get hurt, but at least in this Michigan game, I feel pretty confident in how solid this unit can be.
Notre Dame has their own offensive issues to sort out. All offseason long, Brian Kelly has maintained that Brandon Wimbush is going to be the starter at quarterback, but he's also said that Ian Book is going to play. So who inspires more confidence to move the ball against what's going to be a top 5 defense in the country?
I'm more confident with Wimbush out there just because of his ability to make plays with his legs. Not that Ian Book's a statue or anything. He can actually move pretty well too, but with guys like Rashawn Gary coming off the edge, or Devin Bush, if he's coming into the backfield, I'm much more comfortable with Brandon Wimbush getting out of the pocket, making plays with his feet. That's really where he excels. It obviously worries me after having seen the Miami game last year, the kind of pressure that Miami put on Wimbush and how easily he crumbled. But just in terms of things breaking down and things are going to break down with a defense like Michigan, I definitely trust Wimbush more. Book hasn't really shown that he's unflappable either. I mean, he threw a pick 6 when he came into the Miami game. So I'd much rather have the senior Wimbush, who I know can make big plays with his feet.
Michigan fans, I apologize for waiting this long to talk about your defense. Let's discuss this murder, death, kill unit that Don Brown has assembled in his front 7.
You've got Rashawn Gary, who a lot of people think is potentially a top 5, top 10 pick next year. As disruptive as it gets up front, he kind of reminds me a lot of skill set wise of Ndamukong Suh when he was at Nebraska. So that's a guy that I think can be obviously very disruptive. Chase Winovich on the other side of him, one of those lunch pail guys that has just found a way to develop and get the job done, and a guy that I certainly wouldn't be surprised to have a few sacks in this game. And at linebacker, you've got Devin Bush, who is getting some first-round hype for next year. Khaleke Hudson, who's playing kind of that hybrid safety linebacker role. They call it the Viper in this defense. But, those two guys are game breakers on the defense as well. So that front 7 is very good. Now, you lose a few guys. I mean, you lose Maurice Hurst to the NFL, but they're as deep and as loaded as they have been.
All the focus has gone on Wimbush and Book, but if Notre Dame wants to win, they're probably going to need to be able to run the ball effectively.
Going back to last year, the team succeeded when they were able to run the ball just down people's throats. And it's going to be interesting because Notre Dame has a very good offensive line again this year, but they lost 2 All-Americans on the left side, and Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey, and they lost Josh Adams to the NFL, and Dexter Williams, who everyone thought would probably be the starter this year. There's a lot of rumors that he might be suspended for the first few games. Brian Kelly still hasn't actually come out and said what's going on with him, but it should be interesting to see, can they run the ball at all? Because I think this offense is going to need to be able to run to be successful, and Wimbush will obviously help there, but you need a threat at running back so that, the defense isn't keying on Wimbush the whole time. So Tony Jones Jr. will probably start. He's kind of more of a bowling ball back than anything. He's like a bigger guy, not super fast, but can usually pick up at least a few yards. We need him to really do well, and then maybe a couple other new guys that are going to have to step up if they make some plays and line actually gets their blocks. I think that'll go a long way. In
a game that appears to be this close on paper, the team that makes less mistakes would appear to have the inside track, starting with Michigan.
No, the turnovers can't happen. Got to finish drives with touchdowns instead of field goals. I mean, I know that's the biggest cliche in the book, but like I said before, with as good as Michigan's defense is, I think that they will be able to kind of force Brandon Wimbush to be a little one-dimensional. I think he's a bit better of a runner than he's a passer, certainly. So I think if you're able to lock down his guys on the outside, which I think they have a secondary capable of doing that, I think your offense can do just enough to win you this football game. So I think it's going to be a great game. I know that Notre Dame has kind of swung back as the favorite by a point right now, but we'll see what happens. I think that these are, like we talked about, I think these are two programs that really mirror each other a lot right now, and both teams kind of need to go out and win maybe at least 10 games this year to get the heat off of their respective head coaches. So I think Michigan really, it comes down to the biggest cliche, take care of the football, and I think they'll be in pretty good shape.
Taking care of the ball isn't something Notre Dame's quarterbacks have always done, but they're going to need to on Saturday.
I'm going to say if they force at least 2 turnovers, and let's change that a little bit. They win the turnover battle, because I could easily see Notre Dame turning the ball over too. But they win the turnover battle, and I would say Brandon Wimbush has 1 or fewer interceptions. I honestly think turning the ball over is going to be a huge thing here. So, and maybe I'll even give a stipulation that Notre Dame has to run for at least like 150 yards, because I do think running the ball is going to be key. So yeah, let's say Notre Dame runs the ball really well, keeps it to maybe 1 turnover, and wins the turnover battle overall. I think if those things all happen, it'll be a close game, but Notre Dame will come out on top.
And finally, predictions. We've got one for Michigan.
I said the stat earlier, Michigan hasn't beaten a ranked team on the road since 2006. And to be honest with you, it's really hard to pick them to win this game because of that and because of what we've seen this coaching staff kind of do in big games. I talked about that Michigan State game where they had the trouble with the snap. They had 2 guys out wide as gunners when everyone was packed in on the line. So that was obviously pretty silly of them to do. At Ohio State a couple years ago, you run a play action pass out of your own end zone and get picked off and taken back for 6. When they've lost these games, it's because of self-inflicted wounds. And I think that Michigan will win this game. I think it's going to be close. It may take a stand from the defense late, but I think when I just look at both sides of the football, I think that Michigan has the upper hand with talent. So that's kind of where I have it. In terms of a score, I don't know. I think it's going to be low scoring, probably something like 21-17, 17-14, something like that. So I think that Michigan wins that game. I'm really trying hard not to give them the benefit of the doubt just because that's the team I cover. But when I look at what both teams bring back, I just think Michigan has just a little bit more talent.
And then one prediction for Notre Dame.
This is something I've been going back and forth on. I mean, I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win. There's no question there. I can't pick Michigan to ever win a game, especially against Notre Dame. I'm going to go with Notre Dame 28, Michigan 24. I think it won't necessarily be a low-scoring game, but neither team's going to explode offensively. And I think because both defenses are very strong, but there will be a few big plays probably and maybe a couple turnovers that lead to easy points. But Notre Dame ends up pulling it out probably in the last 5 or 6 minutes with a go-ahead score. So I think the Irish take care of it.
There you have it. Shout out to Patrick and Anthony for both joining the show. Be sure to visit onefootdown.com. Follow them on Twitter at onefootdown. Follow Patrick on Twitter at psully226. And then go to maizenbrew.com. Follow Maize Brew on Twitter at Maize Brew. And follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony T. Broome. Hope everybody enjoyed today's show. Said I was going to switch up the format a little bit. Hope it was unique and creative and worked. I kind of married myself to this idea, so we'll see if it sounds like shit. If it does, then we'll just scrap it out. But wanted to try something different and thought it would be cool to put together 2 sides of not only just a college football game, but one that has the kind of gravity to it, I guess, for lack of a better word, that Michigan and Notre Dame do. So should be a lot of fun to watch it. I know I had fun recording this and getting perspective from both sides. So I hope you enjoyed listening to it, and you can drop me a line on Twitter at DubsCo and let me know what you think about it. You can also find the show on Apple Podcasts by subscribing. Search Two Stripes Podcast, find it there, leave a star rating, leave a review, let me know what I can do to make the show better, and you can find it online at soundcloud.com/twostripespod, and you can find all my video work, which includes this show, on YouTube at youtube.com/Colton Denning. That'll do it for this week's show. If you're a first-time listener, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come back and listen next week when we break down everything that happened in week 1 and then preview another game or another set of games in week 2. But until then, my name is Colton Denning, and this is the Two Stripes Podcast.